As it is written in the Eddas, the pillars of Norse mythology, Baldur is not, in fact, killed by a burly Greek man called Kratos. He's killed by his blind little brother, Hoder, who just wanted attention and was tricked by Loki into throwing a mistletoe dart at Baldur's neck. A child is born to replace Baldur, and before he's even a day old, he kills Hoder so the other gods can have closure. Hang tight. This gets even weirder. Hoder goes to Hel and hangs out with his brother until Ragnarok, and after all the other gods die, they slip out into the new world and play chess with Magni and Modi, while two humans who hid in a magic tree stump repopulate the land. What a life for Hoder, huh? This dork is not in God of War 2018, which is a shame because it's very silly that he's ceremoniously executed by an infant. But more importantly, it begs the question, how does Ragnarok work now? God of War 2018 is a very good game, and I like it a lot. It's the game that got me back into video games, and I feel like a big part of how and why it demanded my attention is the way Norse mythology is sort of remixed throughout the narrative. Because I like Norse mythology a lot, all mythology really, but Norse the most. So what I wanted to do was make a video explaining how Santa Monica's writers creatively twisted Norse legends to serve their narrative. But then I found out that video already exists. It's a video called Untangling God of War by Good Blood, and if you haven't watched it, you should, because it's a great video. But seeing as how I didn't want to just remake it, and probably would have done a worse job anyway, I decided to focus specifically on Ragnarok instead, which if you don't know, is the prophetic apocalypse of Norse mythology, and also the best Thor movie, and also the title of the new God of War coming out really soon, like probably a few days by the time we get this done. When we leave God of War 2018, Ragnarok is on its way. The signs are there, but they look a little different. Ragnarok itself looks a little different. There's no Loki, at least technically not yet. There's no giants. The winter is here, but there seems to be some pieces missing. But the vital component is still there, and one way or another, the apocalypse tends to find a way. Baldur is dead, Odin is pissed, and someone has to pay. Quick mythology lesson. Loki's role in actual Norse mythology is a little murky and somewhat contested. The prevailing notion is that he's half god, half giant, and while not particularly well-liked by the gods, he has an honor-bound seat among them. Something about Odin swearing they're blood brothers once, what matters is they're not allowed to kill him. They're constantly at odds, and whether Loki is a malicious trickster god or a mistreated and ultimately justified usurper isn't entirely clear. Loki is presented as a sour bitch who likes to take potshots at the gods and stir up drama, which usually in ancient mythology means multiple killed, so there's that. But he's also never once proven wrong in his assertions that the gods are greedy, arrogant, and selfish, and that he's never truly treated as one of them. The point of no return for Loki, and therefore the sealing act of Ragnarok's arrival, is his role in Baldur's death. This is when the uneasy relationship he has with the gods goes full hatred. Loki sees the invincibility Baldur is granted as the pinnacle of the Aesir's arrogance, and as they literally throw weapons at him and laugh as they bounce off, Loki decides he wants to teach them a lesson. So comes the dart, the death of Baldur, and when the gods beg Hel for Baldur back and she tells them only if everything in all of existence says they miss him, Loki disguises himself as an old hag and refuses to mourn him, resigning Baldur to eternity in the land of the dead. The stake now driven between the gods and Loki, and by extension sort of all the Jotnar, opens up a massive rift, one from which Ragnarok will eventually well up and somewhat literally consume the world. But without Loki's involvement, it's not that Ragnarok is avoided, it's almost delayed. The path to Ragnarok for the gods begins somewhat definitively with Baldur's death. Everybody's having a pretty good time up until the mistletoe dart lands. The Baldur of the Eddas is a really cool dude. He's hot, he's kind, everyone loves him, and it really bums them out that he's suddenly dead. It signals a dark future. It erodes the already faltering bridge between Loki and the gods, as well as the slightly less so, but still undeniably shaky bonds between the Aesir and the Vanir. Literally everything in the universe except Loki mourns his death. Like, it's a huge deal. But without that death, without Loki, the poison is still already in the world tree. What we see is the 9 realms having slowly deteriorated on their own. Baldur becoming disillusioned with his ironic curse of invulnerability, Freya in exile, the gods and giants forever divided, Odin increasingly paranoid, and the cold, harsh, slow death, both figuratively and literally, of Yggdrasil and the pantheon of Norse mythology. The goal is to remind us, unequivocally, that the gods absolutely suck, which is not far off from the source material. The gods of Norse mythology are, I'll say debatably, as I am in no way a scholar on the subject, somewhat lacking in moral direction, at least by modern standards. The differing values of ancient civilizations have left us with a lot of seemingly odd stories, lest we forget that at the end of the Odyssey, Odysseus just kills all of his wife's suitors and also the housemaids who fraternize with him. But as it stands in Norse mythology, the gods just kind of do as they do, for better and for worse, and a lot of the times they do insane, selfish bullshit, which is infamously one of Kratos' biggest pet peeves. I'll give you an example I've always found amusing. After Baldur's death, as stated, everybody is very upset, but none more than Thor, who hates Loki like a Karen hates a hardworking service industry employee, and simply cannot contain his rage. He spends all of Baldur's nice funeral service pacing and fuming about how Loki deserves punishment, and when the funeral pyre is lit, Thor is so engulfed with the fire of pissy himbo coping mechanisms that he grabs the nearest random dwarf and just punts him into the funeral pyre. This is not treated as a particularly bad thing, but when Loki kills some guy for no reason, all the gods get mad at him. This particular incident also doesn't happen in God of War, but overall, the Norse pantheon is portrayed by Santa Monica as selfish, insecure, petty, cynical, and above all else, irrational. They're so human, it's gross, because the point of the story is that the power of a god requires restraint, not just physically, but emotionally. This is a lesson Kratos has learned the hard way, and one he's actively trying to instill in his son, because destruction is otherwise inevitable, which is where Ragnarok comes in. This Asgard is one that has yet to learn that lesson, that instead of ignoring the signs of a fated apocalypse like they do in the source material, is slowly creating it themselves. Kratos is a man, or a god, who knows far too much about creating your own cataclysm. He single-handedly destroyed Greece. And to protect his son, the new harbinger of a new apocalypse, Kratos may have to lay waste to another land, leaving him a difficult choice between two endless and tragic cycles, that of forsaken children killing their parents, or that of the petty and useless gods destroying their worlds. Before I get into it, consider this something resembling a spoiler warning. Though a lot of the paths have diverged as far as the overarching story, the middle phase of Norse mythology between creation and the coming of Ragnarok does end with Loki getting Baldur killed with a mistletoe dart. So, if you don't want so much as an idea of what could happen, proceed with caution. Now let's talk end times. Here is more or less how Ragnarok happens in actual Norse mythology. A long while after the whole Baldur incident, Loki is feeling himself at the autumn feast, and he gets shit-faced and starts chirping all the other gods. Thor shows up and threatens to kill him, so he leaves, but not before swearing he'll see their great hall burn to the ground and also their bodies and stuff, which is an unwise thing to do when you've been asked to leave the bar. Now, as established, Loki is a sour bitch, so normally this would be somewhat par for the course, but here's the hot goss a lot of the other gods don't know. Back before Baldur died, Odin went to the edge of hell and asked a dead seer what's up with his spooky dreams, and oops, oh no, that seer is also Loki's ex-girlfriend, Angerboda, who is mother to Hel, Jabooby-Dubs the snake, and Fenris the wolf, and she told Odin, get this, that Loki's gonna bring about the apocalypse. So naturally, because things are starting to look rather ominous, and also just because they're pissed at him, the gods hunt down Loki and drag him to the deepest cave they can find. There they've gathered his wife and 2 sons, not the snake and the wolf, his normal sons, and they turn one into a mindless wolf and make him eat his brother. Then, they use that kid's torn out entrails to bind Loki and hang a giant snake, which is not his son the snake, but a normal giant snake, directly over his head so that its venom will drip into his eyes. His wife sits next to him with a bowl forever, catching as much of the poison as she can, but whenever the bowl fills and she pours it out, Loki takes some poison to the eye and writhes and screams, and that's how earthquakes happen. Cool. So fast forward thousands of years, and while the gods are all asleep, the apocalypse just kinda starts happening in Midgard, endless winter, if that perhaps sounds familiar. The world serpent starts moving, Loki and Fenris both escape their bonds, fire demons come down from Muspelheim, the frost giants come out of hiding, the gods finally wake their lazy asses up, and everybody fights to the death on this giant battlefield that becomes the new world. It's pretty awesome, but a massive deviation from the stage God of War has set. But that's the point. This God of War reboot, I guess let's call it, is a story about defying fate, inverting the prophetic structure and generally amoral nature of mythology to highlight the journey of its protagonists trying to be better and move forward. That Ragnarok can't happen the way it's written, that it's already kind of started by the time we catch up to Kratos. It's a sort of metafictional cherry on top of an already very tightly written sundae of cyclical destruction. What makes it most interesting is that in the revised mythology of God of War, as far as I can tell, the Aesir have no idea Ragnarok is coming. The prophecies hidden by the giants are known only to them and to Tyr, and then eventually, kind of, to Kratos and Atreus, aka Boy, aka Loki, but not all of it, obviously. Their role as defiers of fate and the tragic irony of the very likely possibility that they will have to beat and or murder some sense into the other gods is amplified by the burden it's made into. Norse mythology does not hold back about how selfishly, arrogantly, or at the very best, indifferently the gods, especially Odin, ignore prophecy. The man is told that Fenris will eat him at Ragnarok, and when they have the chance to kill him, Odin basically says, "Oh, but his blood would mess up my nice floor." And then they fuck off and leave him chained in the yard until he busts out and eats half the planet during Ragnarok. I know I'm getting way off topic and just explaining Norse mythology too much, but bear with me. To the Aesir of God of War, Kratos and Atreus are the apocalypse, foreign invaders who resemble forces of nature, god killers who reshape the land in their path of destruction, and their hubris in attempting to control him sort of stands in for their traditional role in the bringing of Ragnarok. It inverts Loki's role as a perpetual instigator, these selfish and cowardly gods instead inviting the wrath of Kratos, one entire pantheon's worth of walking retribution. And so, one way or another, we're here, at the final destiny of the gods, as it translates, and it looks pretty fucking rad. Tyr's here, Angerboda is here, which makes the Loki stuff a little weirder. Fenris is also here, somehow, seemingly still no Hel, though. As a fan of the mythos, I am wildly excited to see how they stitch this together, but as a fan of God of War, it is abundantly clear this will be a story of Kratos and Atreus' roles reversing. Kratos is a man who has seen enough violence and cares only for protecting his son. Atreus, who is implied at least by the trailers to be maybe keeping some parts of the prophecy from his father, seems to believe war may be the only answer to stopping Ragnarok and protecting Kratos. The feeling is that this Ragnarok might be fated to begin with the death of Kratos, and Loki storming the land in revenge with an army of giants returning from hiding. I'm guessing. I really don't know how this one will play out, but this is Atreus' story this time around, and the cycle is undeniably here again. It's a story that has been set up with very few pathways to a happy ending, but I think a story about defying fate should be so bleak. The choice is difficult, and I'm probably gonna cry, but it's gonna be worth it. You know why? Because I fucking love Norse mythology. I love it so much, I do. Jesus, I've been going on forever. Did I even talk about the game? You know what? I don't care. You probably learned something today. Go play Ragnarok. It's probably out like tomorrow by now.